think we're live now, it says here.
Okay. Are we getting any comments that we're live?
Yes, it's shown on the screen here. Now it's streaming live.
Excellent.
So we're on.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. And last week we made Janet Gaynor's pumpkin pie. This week we are going to make Marilyn Monroe's stuffing. And I'm so excited today to welcome my special guest, Benjamin, all the way from Germany. He is the president of the Marilyn Monroe fan club in Germany and a tremendous fan of Marilyn. So I'm so happy to have you here today, Benjamin.
Thank you for having me. Good evening from Germany. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. And Benjamin was also on my Marlene Dietrich episode as well, talking to me about the great Marlene Dietrich. So I'm so happy to have you back again. And we are going to do a deep dive today into Marilyn's food, films, life. It's going to be a Marilyn extravaganza, and I'm so excited about it. So thank you so much for tuning in. So Benjamin, tell me, before we start making the food, how did you first discover Marilyn Monroe?
Well, I think I was about 10 years old, and my sister and I, we often had dinner at my grandparents'. And then afterwards, we watched a movie. And at that time, that was the 1980s, on German television, they showed a lot of those old Hollywood movies. And one night, they showed River of No Return. And I didn't know who Marilyn was. I had no idea that she was already gone. And I was just fascinated by her beauty and her sweetness and how she cared for the little boy in the movie. And she was just, yeah, like, you know, some say she was like observing the light. And yeah, that was my really first impression of her. And then, well, some may know at these times it was hard to get information because there was no internet, of course. You had to wait until they showed another movie. And then I saw How to Marry a Millionaire, which I really liked because of the whole style of it. You know, the three girls in this apartment working as models, doing a fashion show. And the very first movie I waited for, and I recorded it on VHS actually, was Some Like It Hot. And when I saw this, I was blown away. So I really fell for Marilyn then.
I think my first exposure to Marilyn, like a lot of people, was through her image as opposed to the actual person or the movies. When I was a little girl, there was a 1950s restaurant in Texas near where I grew up. It was called Thunderbumpers. And a lot of the decor was Elvis, James Dean, and Marilyn Monroe. And I remember as a little girl, like we'd go there occasionally, sitting there eating my burger, looking up and just seeing this picture of Marilyn. It's the famous perfume picture where she's kind of standing like this. And something about it is so enigmatic. It's one of those pictures where you can just sit there and stare at it for hours on end and sort of get different meanings or feelings, or it's just such a powerful image, as most of hers are. And being intrigued by her just by that. And then later when I was in high school, I saw Some Like It Hot on TV, which I think that was the first film of hers I ever saw. And I saw her films on TV, but when I moved to Hollywood in 2000, that was the first time I saw Marilyn on a big screen. And I have to say, that was a whole different ballgame. Like, I mean, I already liked her a lot, but when I saw that big screen and just how 50 billion times larger than life she was on the screen, it just made such an impact on me. I just thought, my God, now I get it. I mean, I already got it, but I double got it when I saw her, you know, in that format. And so anytime I can see one of her films on a big screen, I definitely try to do that because you really get the full, you know, effect that they had on people.
Yeah, she was really made for the big screen. That was a screen persona actually. And with Marilyn, it is like she was one of those legends who is now larger than life, so to say. Yeah, she's just, it's an iconic, just her image is iconic. Yeah.
Yeah, and over the years, through just living and working in Hollywood, I've met so many people that say they love Marilyn and even have tattoos or whatever. But then you say, oh, what's your favorite movie? And they always say, oh, well, I haven't seen them. And I mean, not all, but I have met people that say that. And I always told them, I'm like, if you think she's magical in still images, I'm telling you, watch the movies, you know, because I think that that's when it really all comes alive. And yeah, I'm so glad though that I think every one of her films is available, Benjamin, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, and it's very interesting when you see the ones she had a small part in, how good she was, and how, yeah, she's really lighting up those movies. Well, sometimes they are not very interesting, but they are interesting because she's in it, especially the ones she did before her big breakthrough. But she just had so much to give, and she had all the talents and the look, of course. So yeah, very interesting to compare this.
So since Thanksgiving is just around the corner here, we are going to make Marilyn Monroe stuffing. Now, Benjamin, tell us about the origin of this recipe.
Well, it's in a book called Fragments, and she wrote it down on a piece of paper, I think actually on a paper from an insurance company. And I think it's a recipe from the mid 1950s. So I think maybe 1955 when she was with Arthur Miller. And yeah, I think she had a very close relationship to the parents of Arthur Miller's. And so she wanted to be a good housewife, a good cook. And therefore she wrote, I think, this recipe down, which I thought is quite unusual because there are lots of herbs in it. So yeah, but we'll see.
I have to say, I did a test batch of it the other night, and my whole apartment smelled like a blend of herbs. It was really an interesting, it was actually a good smell, but it really is one of those highly aromatic smells that just fills up the room.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, here in America, I've seen it in Fragments, but I've also seen the recipe in the New York Times. And they've done a couple different articles, both in the cooking section and in another section about this recipe as well.
Yes, right. I also found it on the internet, and some people they made it. They added something or they leave out something, but mainly it's Marilyn's recipe. Yes.
Very cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and start making it here before we do our deep dive into Marilyn. So I've decided to make a vegetarian version. I'm not a vegetarian, but sometimes I do eat vegetarian dishes. So I'm going to go vegetarian with my stuffing today. I hope Marilyn's okay with that. I think that she would be.
Yeah, actually, the original recipe, she added like liver, which I don't like. Also, I will use like minced meat to add to that. Yeah, but the other things, they are all Marilyn like.
And it's definitely an unusual stuffing recipe because at least here I've never had a stuffing before that has a hard-boiled egg and raisins in it. So it's very unusual, I think.
I think so, yes. Yeah.
One of the things that daunted me about this recipe when I first saw it, by the way, I'm making mine just for one because I can't have people over because it's the pandemic and I don't want to make a truckload of food. So I'm making mine for one. But when I saw her recipe, it said take 1 loaf of bread and submerge it in water. And I just like, that's going to make a tremendous mess. And I was very daunted by the idea. But then another friend pointed out that, well, back then the sourdough bread, or if even now, you might get really hard sourdough bread and you might have to soften it up by soaking it in water. Luckily, my store had really soft sourdough bread, so I don't have to submerge it in water, which is good because that could be so messy. But so yeah, my sourdough bread, which I shredded into little pieces.
Yeah. That's what I have here. Actually, I know this from when my grandmother, when she was making meatballs, she also had this like old bread. I think it has to do with maybe it's also part of the generation not to waste anything. And I think it's maybe for to bind all the ingredients better.
That's a great idea. Oh my gosh, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. But
maybe should I add water to this now, or?
Yes. So you put the bread. I just had one slice of bread actually, and put it in the water like for 10 to 15 minutes, and then you just put it apart and put it into a bowl.
Okay. So, should I put a little water on my bread to make it? It's already soft, but should I put some water on it as a binding agent?
I think just soften the whole thing a bit. Yes.
Should I put some water though right now on it as a softening agent, or I do have some chicken broth as well?
Yeah, I would use a little liquid. Yeah.
Okay, well I have some chicken broth, so I'm gonna go ahead and add some chicken broth to the stuffing, which by the way, from anybody following this, I will be posting Marilyn Monroe's original recipe in her handwriting. I will post some New York Times articles, so you'll get a lot of follow-up if you'd like to make your own version.
So I will put in the meat next as the next step.
Okay. Did you already put your bread in there?
Yes, the bread is in already.
Okay, I'll put one in there too. Okay, so you put the bread and the meat in there, right?
Yes, right.
Okay.
And I think next we should put the onions in. So I have like, this is, I have for 2 people now. So these are, maybe it's a cup, I'm not really sure, but I will not make too much of it.
Okay. I always go a little light on my onions as well.
So we have the onions, and then we add some celery.
Okay.
So next I have a boiled egg here, which I sliced into little pieces.
You?
Yes. It's already a nice smell over here. So next I have the grated cheese.
Ah.
Yeah. And I think this is quite unusual. I have a mixture of nuts, like chestnuts and peanuts here. So it goes in there.
I used walnuts for mine.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty flexible on the kind of nut that one can
Yes,
use.
I think so, yes. So, and now it comes to the spices, the herbs. I have a bay leaf here. I think it's the right term, isn't it? Bay leaf.
Bay leaf, yes. I have one.
And then there's parsley. I have here.
Okay.
Great.
You can buy it here either fresh. I bought mine fresh and chopped it up. But you can also buy actual dried parsley flakes as well.
So, and then for the herbs, I have the oregano, and I will do a tablespoon.
Okay. So, 1 tablespoon of oregano.
And rosemary, also a tablespoon. And the next is thyme. And in the recipe, it says that you can also use a mixture of different herbs. I have here, which is actually for chicken. It's like with lemongrass and rosemary. So you can, I think you can do the mix you like best. So you can buy it already mixed.
And also you can use poultry seasoning.
Yes, right.
Sage.
Yeah.
And even nutmeg as well. Did you add the raisins?
No, I left them out, but just for my personal taste. So.
Yeah, I have some raisins here, but I may just not use all of them because it kind of, I don't know, it definitely shifts the flavor of it for sure.
Okay.
Now, did you, when you made the test version of this, did you make the stuffing this way and then put it into the chicken or turkey?
Yes, we used the chicken actually, and it was actually it was too much for the whole chicken, but I put it aside. But it was very, very good then. So we left it for 2 hours in the oven, and it tasted very good. Yes. So we should add some salt and pepper.
And how long should people, what should people set the oven temperature to and for how long?
I read it's 300, and you calculate with 1 pound for half an hour. So we had 2 kilo, which is 4 pounds, and we had it in the oven for 2 hours, and it was very good. So, but it was actually, it was a chicken, not a turkey. So that, but it would be too much otherwise.
Seems to me, I've never actually cooked a turkey, but it seems that it's not an exact science necessarily because there's different kinds of turkeys or sizes.
Yes. And when you have a very, very big one, you have to put it in the oven for hours and hours, and you need to put water on it so that it doesn't get too dry. And I thought, because this is maybe a bit dry, we do it just in the oven. I will add some olive oil to it to have just some liquid.
Okay, I'll do this.
So I would say at least a tablespoon, maybe 2. Yeah, I'll take 2.
And here's what mine looks like so far.
Yeah, mine looks like this.
Excellent. And I made this the other night as during our test session, and I think I might have burned it a little bit, but this is kind of what my final product looked like.
Yes, yeah. So, and then we put it in this, I have such a bowl here. And then it goes in the oven for an hour, 300 degrees.
Right.
Okay,
Now,
I just put mine in the oven. I'll be back in a second.
Okay. By the way, if any of you watching decide to make this or any of the other Hollywood Kitchen recipes, send them my way. It would be totally fun to post them and hear your stories about making them, how it turned out. So let us know, because it's always kind of fun to share that with other people. And I do have to show off, here is a copy Benjamin sent me of the Marilyn Monroe magazine, Marilyn Today. Yes,
absolutely. That's the latest issue. I do 3 per year. It comes in April, August, and it will be out, the next one will be out in December. So it's in print now. It's about like 30 pages. And it's called Marilyn Today because it covers her influence until today. So it's not just Marilyn's story because fans, they know it already. So I do interviews with authors who wrote books on Marilyn, or who had a certain view to Marilyn, or, you know, we did this interview because of Hollywood Forever. There are lots of people who are connected to Marilyn. It's very interesting, I think, all about to learn about her connections in Hollywood.
Interesting to me. My friend Elisa Jordan is a very big Marilyn fan, and she helped put together a Marilyn Monroe convention a few years ago here in Los Angeles. And she called and they wanted to book my cemetery tour. And I said, well, you know, Marilyn's not at Hollywood Forever. And they said, yeah, but John Huston and Harold Rawson and other people she worked with, and they wanted to take the tour. And you know what amazed me, Benjamin, was the morning of the tour, a lot of these women had flown in from all over the globe for this event. And I kind of asked them, oh, you have family and friends in Hollywood, right? Or you're here for other stuff. And all of them were like, no, we're all here for Marilyn. And I thought, how amazed would she be to know that, you know, women are flying in from like New Zealand and Scotland and literally around the globe just to see locations that had to do with her life and to celebrate that life.
Yes, absolutely. And she, that's a thing I like very much about her. She connects people. So like for our fan club, we're located in Germany, and there's one issue totally in German language and one in English. And so we have members all over the world, really, like in Australia and the United States and England, Finland, France, Belgium. So it's really great and it really connects people. And, you know, Greg Schreiner, I met him last year. He told me he usually has these meetings in his home, that there's a guy flying in just for the meeting, and afterwards he goes back to the airport and flies back home. So it's great how she really connects people until today, all over the world, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I always say on the tour, you know, some stars are of their time and there are other stars that are for the ages. Excuse me, I'm not sick, it's just allergies. And Marilyn is definitely for the ages. Like she, I think 50 years from right now, 100 years from right now, people about her films.
Oh, you're just frozen.
Oh,
you will in a second. Okay, I think I can hear you, but you're frozen. Oh, there you are.
You back?
Yes, I am. So
let me go back to Facebook again and repost it to Facebook. No, it says, no, we're not. Okay, I guess we're still going. Okay, cool.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay.
So you
So
asked for the
Marilyn film and why?
Did you ask for my favorite movie?
Or? Yeah, your favorite Marilyn film and why?
Oh yes, it's hard to pick one. I really like Some Like It Hot because it's not just Marilyn; it's a great comedy, great cast, and it's an evergreen. You can watch it again and again, and you will always find new aspects of it. And I also like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes because I think it was just genius to pair Jane Russell and Marilyn together. But I also like, you know, films like she has a supporting part like All About Eve, which is a great classic, of course. And it's interesting to learn about her performances in, for example, Clash by Night, which is a great Barbara Stanwyck movie. To see her in a non-glamour role. So nearly every Marilyn movie is interesting.
I agree. It's hard to pick one. If I absolutely had to pick one, though, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, that movie cracks me up so much. And I love the songs. She and Jane Russell are magic together. They're so good. And I love kind of the female camaraderie that they have. And I just think that movie is probably one of her most iconic. I was really lucky, though. I got to see the Misfits on the big screen at LACMA several years ago. And that movie just gutted me. It just broke my heart so badly. I left the theater thinking that was a great movie and I will never be able to sit through that again. It's just something about it. Maybe it's knowing that that was her last film. It was Gable's last film, knowing the circumstances of the production. It's just, and even if I didn't know all of that, I still think it would have just gutted me. You know, it was just so sad, but it was so good too. Really, really excellent.
It's really a very fine acting of hers. It's not not a typical Marilyn movie. So, and as we know, she wanted to develop and she learned and everything. And this, it would have been interesting to see her in those kind of parts. And I think also her voice is a bit different there. It's a bit lower. It's not the Marilyn gentlemen prefer blondes type, but it's very, very good, of course. Yes. Yeah, I love it.
You know, one thing that always sticks out with me about Marilyn too is that she really was very serious about her craft. You know, I mean, that year she spent in New York just observing at the actor's studio. I mean, I can't think of a lot of stars who would have done something like that, you know? I mean, she was so incredibly serious about her work and as an artist.
Yeah, you when you listen to interviews, for example, Jane Russell, she said, well, Marilyn was the first on the set in the morning and the last one to leave in the evening, and she still was, you know, rehearsing her dances and everything. When you take this movie, it looks like they are just having fun, but it was hard work. So she danced and she sang herself and she acted. And Barbara Rush, I met her last year actually, and she said, well, I knew Marilyn and they were together at the Hollywood Studio Club. And she said, well, she was willing to learn and she wasn't, this is interesting, I think. Nearly everyone who actually knew her and I talked to told me that she wasn't this bombshell at all. So this was a kind of a character she created for the screen. But it was, yeah, as we know, it was often mixed up, but that wasn't the real person. So she, was said in an interview by Susan Strasberg, who really was friends with her. She said, well, Marilyn was like as if she was putting a light on. So she just said, well, shall I be her? And it was like that. And she was Marilyn and people were turning their heads and, oh, this is Marilyn Monroe. And yeah, that was a great phenomenon and a great ability she had. Yeah.
A lot of the stars, though, when they had trouble, there sort of seemed to be the movie screen image versus the private person. And I think that was separating those two things was really hard for a lot of them. And I don't think a lot of them were actually able to really do it, you know, yeah. Or not even just in their own mind, but in the minds of people who knew them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were kind of stuck in a certain image and people, or maybe it was the studio, they wanted her in this particular image and she wanted to learn and to develop and people didn't seem to like that. Maybe not people, but studios maybe. So
well, I think it's also the perception, which I hope is changing, but the fact that someone that gorgeous and sexy can't possibly be smart, can't possibly be driven, can't possibly, you know, have goals or I mean, they kind of just treated it like, if you're sexy and beautiful, what else do you need in life? You know, I think there was kind of a real sexism and a real discrimination toward, you know, women who look like that. They just
and when you think of how smart she was, that she was sometimes she was treated very disrespectful from the press. Or when you see footages of her, there's a close up of her cleavage or her legs or something, and it is when you see it nowadays, it's almost idiotic, ridiculous. When you think what do you wear when you did this nude photo? And she was very smart and clever and said, well, no, what was on was the question actually. And she said, well, the radio was on. So that was very smart of her. And she had this very witty, sayings. So she was very clever with that, yeah.
And that was such a great way to handle the nude calendar situation because, you know, that could have been a career-ending massive scandal, but she just kind of played it off as like, I needed rent, the radio was on, and she had such a sense of humor about it and such a self-awareness about it that I think it kind of completely diffused the situation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, she was, when you see this, when you see it nowadays, how the press treated her, it was very disrespectful, I think. And she was in many ways very much ahead of her time. So she didn't want to stuck in a certain image or just to be one character. And she was, in many aspects, she was very much ahead of her time, which is even today a very interesting topic. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think her personal life has always been something that's fascinated people for better or worse. I think that it's almost like a Rorschach blot that people sort of project their own emotions onto or see themselves in, perhaps. And I met a lady one time at a networking event here in Hollywood, and she worked at a nonprofit, and it's in the Holly Grove orphanage where Marilyn lived. It's part of that. And she said her office was Marilyn Monroe's room at the orphanage. And she told me tons of women would call her and ask to stand in that window and look out the window.
Yeah.
And she told me she said yes to them. And she said, you wouldn't believe how many women have looked out the window in my office and cried. And I was like, oh God, that's so heartbreaking. But
yeah, that's this kind of legendary story that she was at Holly Grove, and she looked up at the window, and there was, which is now the Paramount Tower, and she made her wish. Yeah, one day I will become a movie star, and it's so interesting to go to the places she had actually been. So I was there last year, and it was like magic to finally go to the places I knew from the movies, of course, and from footages and books. Yeah, it was just great. Yeah.
definitely. And Marilyn Monroe's image is really still with us all over Hollywood. I mean, even if you are people, even if someone is not familiar with her, which I can't imagine that being the case, but anywhere you go in Hollywood, her picture is almost ubiquitous. Like she's constantly watching over all of us, you know?
Yeah.
But to me, I think she grew up idolizing Jean Harlow, because Jean Harlow was sexy and blonde and brassy. And it's kind of interesting that that was her role model. And then they wound up getting to work with several of the same people too, including George Cukor and Clark Gable. And there's kind of a lot of connections between both of them.
Yeah, so many. And when she was a very like a movie geek when she was a child, she was maybe sent to the movies on a Saturday, and she paid just a few pence for it. And she stayed there for hours and hours and hours and watched the movies again and again. And she was so fascinated. And then actually she became this movie goddess herself. That was, yeah, that was magic. That was great. So she was the right person happening this kind of thing to her. Yeah. And she was very much, you know, aware of her fans. She said, has this quote, when I'm a star, people make me a star. There was no studio and no person. It was just the people who made me a star. And so she was very connected to her fans and her people, I think. So, and this is great, yes.
It seems like she wanted love, and that was very important to her. And the fans kind of represent maybe that love that she so desperately sought.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so interesting, you know, to learn about all the connections, of course, to go to places she had actually been, and people who really know her or knew her become rare, sadly. But it's this is what I'm doing, try to do with the magazine, to like cherish these stories, you know, to catch a glimpse of the real person. So that's very interesting. And there are tons of books about her, of course. And I personally think it's interesting to throw a certain aspect, so not the whole thing, not the tragic, some exaggerating, but to pick a certain aspect of hers. That's what interests me.
Yes. Well, I think also with the Me Too reckoning and recent events, it almost seems like it warrants a fresh look at her, and also the way she was treated, the way she was dealt with. I mean, there's so many things that jump out at you now that maybe didn't jump out at people then whatsoever, in terms of how to treat someone, how to be kind to someone. You know, it's really interesting to kind of take a look at history through the eyes of the time, but also the eyes of today.
Yeah. And Hollywood changed very much. I think her death was really a turning point. So that was what she wanted, was to be in control herself of her career and the movies she would play in and the directors she would like to work with. And this was, this must have been a relief for her if she would have been there. And she was also, in this point, she was very much ahead of her time. And I love, for example, I love the look of the Something's Got to Give movie. So there was very pre-1960s with this her hair in this wave and the flower dress, and it would have been interesting to see that movie and to see how her career would have continued.
What do you think she would have gone on to do had she not died young?
Well, I think she would have looked for different parts to act. Maybe she would have become a producer or something. Maybe she would have been tired of acting somehow. Yeah, it would have been interesting. And I think she was so great in modeling. And when you see photos of her, I wrote a quote that it was almost impossible to make a bad photo of her. And I think also in age, she would have looked wonderful. So yeah, still a movie goddess, I think.
George Harrell, I think, once had a quote about Harlow. He said that, oh, I'm going to get the quote wrong, but something to the effect of that she treated the camera as a co-conspirator. You know, like she just had such a connection with the camera and with that lens. And I think Marilyn had the same thing. She was a co-conspirator with the camera.
Yeah, that was her natural talent, I think. So yeah, she focused on it because she became a model. But interesting, when she did The Prince and the Showgirl, she worked with many actors who were trained at the theater, like Laurence Olivier was, and Dame Sybil Thorndike. And it's also in this movie, My Week with Marilyn, that Sybil Thorndike, she's whispering to Olivier, well, she's the only one who knows how to behave in front, or to act in front of a camera. Not to an audience really, but yeah, the camera really loved her. And it's still interesting to discover pictures of her and photos you haven't seen, or you have seen from a different angle or something. So there's still things to discover, and she offers so much. Her body of work is enormous. So you can pick every part of it, and it's still it's interesting. Although some may say, well, it's, you know, her story and everything. But well, sometimes a photo tells more than a movie or than words. So there's always something to discover.
Well, when I talk about Judy Garland on the cemetery tour that I do, when I get to her grave, I really don't talk about the tragic aspects of her life. And someone asked me why, and I said, well, first off, it's kind of common knowledge at this point. And secondly, she hated the narrative that was the takeaway, that her life is this big tragic mess. She didn't like that at all. Her kids really hated it. And I feel like it doesn't honor her to stand at her grave and say all of that. But what I do say is that, you know, in spite of whatever problems and pain and difficulty she might have had behind the scenes, when she got in front of that camera, she gave 100%. When she got on that concert stage, in that recording booth. And to think about it, to think of all that these people went through, and I include Marilyn in that, the fact that they were still able to do the work they did, and they were still able to create and to give us this art, give us this music, these films, to me, that's really actually pretty astounding.
Yes, it is. And I think also with Judy Garland, and Marilyn, they kept their sense of humor. Maybe so they had their demons, but they were always witty and had their sense of humor, and was like a connection to the audience. They still had it every time, and and that's maybe what made them so big. So there was a certain it, as it's often said. Yeah, they definitely had it. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's just something about Marilyn, again, it's just, you look at her and you can see so many things in those eyes, in that face, and, you know, and she's sort of like our Mona Lisa of our time, you know, or of that era. She's just this incredibly fascinating woman, for sure.
Yeah, I often read about her that she was like absorbing the light, and for me, she's like a kind of Tinkerbell, actually. So that comes into someone's life, and it's lightning, and it's she's touching you. And it's also in a play called Marilyn and Me, which is by Luke Yankee, whom I also met through Marilyn. His mother was Eileen Heckard, and they played together in Bus Stop, which is also a great movie of her. And she was very emotional when she talked about Marilyn. It was this point that she was able to touch people's souls. That was really a natural given ability of hers, I think. So that made her very, very special.
Let me ask, what are your favorite books on Marilyn? Because I think probably more than any other movie star, Marilyn has probably had the most books written about her. And I try to be kind of picky about what I read because I think, again, so many books are either complete hatchet jobs on that person or they turn them into saints. And I feel like, the truth is so much more nuanced and complicated. And I'm always kind of looking for books that are really well done, well researched, and really cut to the heart of the story and who that person was.
Yes, yeah, you're right. There are tons of books about her, and what I don't like is to just focus on the tragic or to focus on how the Kennedys are connected to her into her death, maybe or something. So I have a few books here. I like the ones that Michelle Morgan did. She's also a friend of mine. We met through the fan club, and we actually met. So maybe she's watching. And hello. So this was, for example, very helpful when I was in LA because it's all about Marilyn's addresses, the places she went, and you can look up the addresses and have lots of information. And this is another one called The Little Book of Marilyn, which is about her styling, her clothing, and so many different aspects. So that's a very cute little one. She also did other books, like this is a biography, really, Private and Disclosed. And this is also an interesting aspect. The girl, was Marilyn Monroe an unlikely feminist, which is a interesting question. So I like these kinds of books. Also, these are very great biographies on her from Gary Vitokoropoulos, who's also a dear friend. A 2-volume, very big, but very well researched biography on her. And also it focused on the mental health issues from a today's point of view, which is interesting. And what I also love is coffee table books, so to look at pictures. And David Wills, he has a few books out also on Marilyn. This one's called Marilyn in the Flesh. He has another one which is called Metamorphosis. And it's just great photos to look at. The colors are so bright. And he also has another one called Hollywood and Kodachrome, which I love. Yeah, so these are some favorites of mine. And what I think also is with Marilyn, she, personally for me, she was kind of the key to Hollywood, to old Hollywood, to other Hollywood stars that she was connected to. Maybe she did a film with them or she met them or something. Yeah, for me, she was kind of the entrance key to old Hollywood and to the whole interest. Yeah, she's offering just so much.
The book I enjoy about Marilyn, well, it's sort of about, that is about Marilyn. Tony Curtis with Mark Vieira on the making of Some Like It Hot. And this one is really fun because it just delves into the making of the whole movie in pre-production, production, when it was released. And I got to see Tony Curtis in person many years ago before he died here in Hollywood. And also I've been down to the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego where they shot a lot of the movie. So I really love this movie, and this is a fun book as well. Yeah. And anytime Benjamin and I talk about books, I always encourage you, if you can support Larry Edmunds in Hollywood or any local independent bookstore if you want to purchase any of these, because the holidays are coming up and I know a lot of small businesses have been hit so badly in the pandemic. So anything we can do to help keep those businesses afloat, it's a good thing.
Absolutely. And it's so, it's so legendary. I like to order books from Larry Edmunds because they're coming in this brown paperback, which I love. So, and you have what I think also is great, that you have the opportunity to get really signed books, signed by the author, which is great. And well, for me, because I'm so far away, of course, it's also a great aspect that Marilyn really connects people all over the world. I learned, I met you and I met a lot of other people through Marilyn, and it's just great to chat about her and what's your favorite movie and have you seen this photo of hers, or where was she at this point? And it goes on, not just about Marilyn, it's about Hollywood and what movies do you else like and everything. And she's really connecting people. And that's, I think, kind of her legacy also, that she has this ability to connect people all over the world still.
I agree. Would you want to take any questions? We can go on Facebook and see if people are asking us questions.
Yes.
Let's see. Having so many technology issues lately.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Don Murray was told me that she was very sweet. Monique writes or commented. That's yeah, that's what I meant. That's interesting to learn from people who really worked with Marilyn or met her, and they becoming less sadly. But it's interesting to cherish those stories.
Definitely. Danny Miller says, does anyone in Germany do Thanksgiving dinners?
Not really. So I have I know from some American friends who live in Germany, they do, but usually no.
Okay. Don Murray told me she was very sweet. Very cool. Jane Russell spoke kindly of Marilyn. She called her a sweet girl.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That's interesting from Danny. Do you think impressions of Marilyn in Germany and Europe are different from how she is perceived in the United States? Well, maybe. What I think it was post-war Germany, and she was called this bombshell, you know. And in German and in Europe, and maybe except Brigitte Bardot, we didn't have those kind of actresses or bombshells. So she also represents America, I think, in Europe, and is a big symbol. And I think decades after her death, we're discussing her, like the aspects, was she an unlucky feminist or the Me Too thing? So that's interesting. But I think in her days, she was just unusual, and you wouldn't see a woman like Marilyn on the street. She was so, like we said, she was very much this screen persona, and yeah, therefore she was very special, I think. Yeah.
Crystal Lawler was saying she loves How to Marry a Millionaire because she loves Marilyn and the glasses, which again, that's kind of a different thing you would normally not expect her to do.
Yeah. And at that time, you know, now it's fashionable to wear those kind of glasses, and at these times it wasn't. So it was, you know, that was the joke of it, that Marilyn didn't want to wear glasses in this movie. But I love the whole style of it, you know, the 1950s style. The dresses are gorgeous, and also with Betty Grable and Lauren Bacall, they were great together. So for me, they were like three Barbie dolls living in this New York apartment, having a fashion show, and yeah, almost unreal. So yeah.
And I've gone to several of Kimberly Truler's lectures. Kimberly, the great fashion film historian and upcoming author. I know you have too, Benjamin. I love the story that Kimberly tells about Marilyn on the set of Jennifer Blonde. She wanted to wear a super revealing outfit for the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend number. And the production code was not at all going to let that fly because it was really racy. And so Trevia, the famous designer who worked with her a lot, I think he had like, what, 24 hours to come up with something completely different. And that's where we got this super iconic hot pink dress with the bow on the back.
Yeah, and in her time, she was very much ahead of her time, because now we have, of course, like Lady Gaga and Madonna and Cher and everything. But at that time, they didn't have the fabric at that time. It was very special to have those gowns and those fabrics. It's what's like when we talked about Dietrich earlier. There was every little sequin or whatever that was on this dress had to be sewed, and because they didn't have the fabric. And so yeah, she was just glamorous as she could, and therefore I think she was very, very special, and great screen persona. And yeah, that's sometimes that's maybe also an aspect to talk about, that she became larger than life, and the legend became larger than life. And it's, for me personally, it's interesting to look behind this icon and behind this legend, because yeah, there was so much than just blonde hair and red lips, of course. So.
I mean, I always talk about that on the tour too, is how a lot of these women might have been sex symbols, bombshells, icons, but underneath that all, they were real people. And that's something that I try to never forget, you know?
Yeah, and for Marilyn, I think she wanted to belong, and she would like to have girlfriends. And well, for women, she was a kind of threat. But I think I heard this also. People told me that she liked to be with girls, and she never flirted with men when there were girls around. And yeah, she really wanted to belong. So yeah.
What was your favorite location related to Maryland that you went to when you came to Hollywood?
Oh, there was so many. Actually, I liked to go to Westwood, but to see, which was legendary, the lips, you know, the grave which is covered with lipstick, and that was. But I had the feeling, I don't know if she was really there. You know, I think she lives on in the movies and the photographs. But it was, of course, great to be there, and I like to be in front of her last home. Which is very much discussed, and you know, of course, the pictures of it, and to be there and to know, well, this is where all this happened. So that was great. Yeah.
I think for me, it was the forecourt of the Chinese, because I'd seen the pictures of she and Jane Russell putting their their handprints in the cement and everything. And when I very first moved to Hollywood, I noticed there were so many tourists in that area. And I thought, you know, I want to get down there when I have it to myself. So I got up at like 6 o'clock on like a Saturday morning one time, and I went down there, and there was not a soul down there. And it was so great because I could put my hands in the cement, and I could kind of think about all the pictures I'd seen and footage I'd seen of all the ceremonies there. And it just kind of had this magic to it, having that incredible forecourt to just play in, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were also at the Hollywood the Museum, which is in the Max Factor building, to see her gowns and her, you know, that's also interesting when you see her gowns, to see how tiny she was. You know, we were at Greg Schreiner's, and he showed us the gowns Marilyn wore. And well, for example, he showed us a blouse and said, well, this wasn't made for a busty woman. This was very petite, very tiny. And to see it, because when you see her on the screen, I always thought, oh, she must have glowing and lightning and just so big, larger than life, so to say. But when you see things that actually belong to her, you can get an idea of how tiny she was, and that she was really a human being. So it's very interesting to see that.
Oh, absolutely. Now, a friend of mine told me that Marilyn didn't cook a lot, but she did try during her marriage to Arthur Miller. And a friend told me that she really loved peas and carrots because she liked the way they looked on a plate. And sometimes she would just like stare at it.
Yeah, that's the story when she was with Jim Doherty. I mean, she was just 16. She liked the colors of peas and carrots and put them together. Yeah, that was, and I heard another story she told in an interview from 1960 that she once made a dinner with homemade noodles, and she didn't know how to dry them. And she she gave her guests another drink, and she was in the kitchen, and then she used a hair dryer. Um, so she wasn't very much of a cook, I think. What I've read is that she liked steaks and salad. So she was very like low carb. And she had for breakfast, she had a milk with 2 eggs grilled in. Yeah, but I also read that she didn't eat regularly. She was in restaurants, so, and she wasn't that very much of a cook. And this recipe, or the stuffing, I think that was her connection to the Millers and to become a housewife, and yeah, to belong to the family. And yes, I think that was it.
Very cool. She probably didn't have a lot of normal Thanksgivings growing up either. So maybe this was her way of wanting to establish a tradition.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. And I liked, she just wrote it on a piece of paper, like it was an insurance company paper, I think. And she, in this book, Fragments, you can read a lot of her, what her notes, or what she put in a diary, or just wrote something down. interesting to know about her thoughts.
Oh, definitely. So let's see if anyone's asked us some more questions.
Yes.
Do you see any more questions?
I heard she was size 12, Hazel says. Yeah, she was actually, well, sometimes nowadays she's considered as being very luxurious and very big size, and I think she wasn't. So when I saw the gowns that she wore, it was interesting to see how tiny she must have been. Yeah.
Sizing is really, in my personal opinion, really subjective, because I've worn some clothes that are like, I fit in a small. I've worn other things, it takes an extra large to fit. I mean, you know what I mean? It just depends on the line, who's making it, what their measurements are in terms of the line, the sizing of the line, you know? Yeah. There's, in fact, there's one dress company, it's a small business here in LA, and they make their own clothes here in LA. I have 3 dresses from them. I have a small, a medium, and a large, and all 3 fit me perfectly. So if that tells you anything.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think she must have been very petite. So and she wasn't that that tall. She wore high heels, of course, most of the time when she was in public. Yeah, but of course her gowns are so iconic. Like when you know the pink one from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. There was also a similar one in white. She wore for a premiere, and she wore with some fur coat or something, and it was just the epitome of glamour and movie star, and that's her image until today. Yeah.
I love the gold pleated gown too that she wore. That is so exquisite, and that has been used or reproduced or inspired so many other gowns ever since. And Kimberly Cooler mentions that in her lectures.
Yeah, and you know, I also liked her 1962 style when she was at the Golden Globes. She had the sequins. I think it was actually green. Of course, it's in black and white photograph. That was amazing. And also this flowery dress she wore in Something's Got to Give. This was a bit reduced maybe, but she looked great in it. And they did the movie with Doris Day afterwards, the same story. And it would have been interesting to see how she would have been in that movie, actually, because I think it would be a very nice little comedy. And first time she played a mother. So that would have been interesting to see. Yeah, and the footage is sometimes you read in the books, oh, well, she was late and she felt measurable. And well, I can see that. I think she was great. And she looked fabulous. Also in the swimming pool scenes, she was great.
That would have gotten a truckload of attention when that came out in theaters for that scene alone.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a shame that she didn't get to complete Something's Got to Give. I think that would have been a great movie for her. But it was also at the same time Fox was struggling with Elizabeth Taylor and Cleopatra over in Rome. So, excuse me, Fox was really having a really rough time in the early 60s. And of course, as we know, the studio system was kind of collapsing around that time as well. So it was a really weird time with Hollywood shifting, underground, or the ground shifting under everybody's feet. But I really think it'd be interesting to see how Marilyn Monroe would have evolved throughout the decade of the 1960s.
Absolutely, yeah. And I just read another question from Danny. He's asking me if I have any items that actually belong to her. Well, sadly, I haven't because I couldn't afford it. But I have some magazine covers that are from the 1950s, so when Marilyn was still around. And I really like this one, for example, from There's No Business Like Show Business. And it's sometimes it's with Marilyn, you may know the costume or the photo, but this is a different angle or a different pose. So, and she was, I think also with posing, she was, that was a natural talent. So she made it, she posed and made it look as if she would not. So that's, yeah. I've also read about her that she, when she was in private, she liked to wear very casual style, just blouse and slacks. And she wasn't interested in that kind of glamour. That was maybe her job. And it is often said that she divided her persona into Norma Jean and to Marilyn. It was the same with Dietrich, I think. So they really knew about her image and the screen persona up there. And yeah, when you think about it, it's kind of weird. So to think of yourself as another person. So yeah, interesting aspect.
All right, anybody else have any more questions for us?
Oh yes, I read the tiger dress from 70 Itch. It was just went for auction, and I think it was like, was it $475,000? I think it was sold. Yeah, it was in the news the last weeks. Yeah.
I think anything related to Marilyn is going to go for a tremendous amount of money for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to find because sometimes there are also replicas of the gowns, and it's also like when you're looking for an autograph of Marilyn's. So sometimes it was a secretary signature, and well, it's very hard to find, and when you really find one which is real, which you can't know really, you couldn't afford it. So. Yeah, and therefore I think it's more interesting for me to look at her photos, to look at her movies. Well, like again and again, but you will always find different aspects of it. I watched the Misfits last week actually, and for example, I noticed that in one scene there's this cupboard open. There are pinups of the actually Marilyn Monroe in this movie, and I think, well, what is this for? Because it has nothing to do with the part that she's playing there. So there, the person Marilyn Monroe comes into this movie. Maybe it was like John Huston liked the idea of it or something. But yeah, that was kind of, well, I thought about it.
I have a question. So if someone wanted to subscribe to your magazine and get it, how could they go about doing that?
We have a homepage, which is marilyn-monroe-fanclub.de, but you can also just drop me a line on Instagram or Facebook, and I will tell you how to subscribe. Sorry. Well, there is a fee, of course, because I have to pay for the printing and the shipping, but I'm very happy that there are still people around that appreciate, like, you know, in the old days, receiving a magazine, paper printed magazine through the mail. And I know there are some collectors out there who have it. And it's a different thing to just to read something online or really to hold something in your hand. And I'm very glad that people appreciate it. So, but yeah, because the work, it's kind of, it takes a lot of time, you know, to put it together. And there are also two versions, one whole in German and one in English. And you know, to look for interview partners and to look for pictures and everything. And it's 30 pages. So yeah, that's quite something. But it's also rewarding when there are people who appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's see, I think we might have a few more questions here. Do you think she and Joe DiMaggio would have remarried, or were they just good friends?
Oh, it is said that they wanted to remarry. And there are pictures of her from 1962 where they were on the beach together, and maybe they found each other again, so they knew each other already. And yeah, it is said that they wanted to remarry. Yeah, and it is said that Marilyn was Joe's love of his life. You know, he paid for the roses 20 years. He made people, or he ordered roses for her grave. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really sad, heartbreaking story, but kind of a beautiful one at the same time.
Yeah, really.
Hen Johnson says, is it true she had the heel of one shoe shorter than the other to give her a wiggle in her walk?
Yes, I read about it. I know if it's really true, but I read about it with the Niagara walk, wiggle walk. Maybe it's a legend. I'm not sure, but yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't know. I love the description of her though, like Jello on springs.
Yeah. Yes.
So, we have any more? right, I don't know if we have any more questions, but any final thoughts on Marilyn or anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, I think it's just so great that that I have met so many nice people through Marilyn. That was like Greg Schreiner said to me, well, Marilyn, she really like enriched my life, and I can really relate to that. So yeah, I met great people through Marilyn, and as I said, it's not just talking about Marilyn, but also getting to know each other. Or when you are able to travel again to meet each other actually in person, that's great. And yeah, so she's still around. Yeah.
Yeah, I've told you this story off camera, but I just love it because sometimes you find Marilyn in unexpected places. My mom and dad live in coastal Georgia, and one time a few years ago, I was home to visit my family, and my dad wanted to go on a fishing trip. So we rented like a fishing boat, you know, thing for the day, and we went down to the docks, and there's this little cottage on the dock, and there's a fishing boat captain. It was a woman, and I said to her, you know, can I run in your cottage and use the restroom before we get on this boat trip all day? And she said, sure. And I went into her cottage, and the whole place was nautical stuff and Marilyn Monroe stuff everywhere. And I just looked around and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I went outside and I told her I lived in Hollywood and how much I loved Hollywood history. And she said, you know, I love two things. I love being a boat captain and I love Marilyn Monroe. And I was like, that was so cool. I never expected to find a female fishing boat captain with a huge Marilyn Monroe love. So that was really kind of a fun little story.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, her influence is so interesting, and how she's connected. For example, I have in the next edition of the newsletter, I have a kind of tribute to Laurie Nelson, who passed away in August. And she, for example, played in a How to Marry a Millionaire TV series, which also starred Barbara Eden. And so there are so many connections to other stars Marilyn worked with, or they played in a movie together. Yeah, it's still interesting to learn.
Since we are still in some pretty difficult times in the pandemic, and of course, Thanksgiving's coming up, so a lot of us, including me, are not going to be able to be with lots of friends and family. What movie do you think you could recommend that would just cheer everybody up? And if there's one or two Marilyn movies they can watch over the holiday, which ones would you pick?
I would say, well, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, because it's just a blast. Of course, Jane Russell. I also love Jane Russell. And she also said that it was her favorite movie she did. And maybe another one to discover Marilyn, maybe Don't Bother to Knock, because she plays a babysitter with mental health issues, which is an interesting part and not very Marilyn-like, but she's great in the acting, and maybe you should go for this one. Yeah, so it's very different parts, and they're just 1 year away from each other. But it's interesting to combine, to see what she was able to do on film.
Oh, definitely. Let's check one more time to see the questions. All right, well, I think that's it with the questions, but this was so fun.
Maybe we can have a look in the oven, how it looks.
Mine is actually, I'm still preheating my oven. I was going to kind of cook it because my whole kitchen gets really, really hot if I'm in here with the oven on.
I will get mine out and see how it looks. I think it was like 40 minutes now. It's not like 10 minutes more to go, but I can look.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
That's good. By the way, again, any of you watching, if you try to make this, let me know. Send me pictures. Tell me how it went. And also, I am working on a Hollywood Kitchen blog, and hopefully in the next week or two that will come out, and I will be able to kind of detail how we made certain things, have pictures, and it'll be a lot of fun. So stay tuned.
So there's just 8 minutes to go, but it looks very nice, I think.
Oh, it sure does. That looks great.
Yeah. Looks like yours, so a bit browner, but yeah, I think it looks nice. And I think also we just did the stuffing now, but I think it goes well together when you just have some slices of bread, I can imagine. And it tastes really great because of all the herbs and spices. So yeah.
And it smells really great in your apartment too, because when I was cooking this the other night, the whole place smelled so like aromatic for like a day or two.
Yeah. 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 So it's a great tribute to Marilyn to have for Thanksgiving, I think. Even turkey.
Have Marilyn stuffing and Janet Gaynor pumpkin pie.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Benjamin, for being my guest today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And we're going to do more episodes because I've got more ideas and more recipes, so you're not off the hook yet. I've got more fun things we can do together online here. And again, thank you all for watching. I think as Benjamin and I have talked about, I always tell him, you may be in Germany, but your heart is right here in Hollywood. And I just feel so grateful for the many friends I've made over Zoom, over Facebook, Instagram, social media. And it really does enrich your life when you find people that share your love and that really care about this history, about these stars, and about keeping it going.
Absolutely. It was great fun. Yeah, lovely to see you all. I will have a look at the comments later. I know some of you were joining. Thank you very much.
And also, I will download this and post it to YouTube shortly and post a link on Facebook. The blog is coming soon with more details. So thank you so much for joining us today in Hollywood Kitchen.
Bye.
Bye.